Call the Apache Junction City Council work session to order. Roll call.
Oh, absolutely.
Here.
Here.
Councilmember Barker,
Here.
Councilmember Evans,
Here.
Councilmember Rizzi,
Present.
Councilmember Struble,
Here.
Councilmember Waldron.
Here.
All members present. You have a quorum, Your Honor.
Presentation and discussion on on-call architectural surveying, engineering consulting services for Public Works. Emil.
Mayor Surdy, council members, it has been a long time since I've stood before you in a council meeting. In case you've forgotten, I'm Emil Schmidt. I'm the city engineer.
How could we forget you?
City engineer in the Public Works Department. And I'm here this evening to present item number 18-471, which is PW 2018 Public Works on-call services. And on-call services or on-call consultants for us mean or represent a pre-selected or a pre-approved group of consultants that can provide services for us. And the reason that we want to pre-select and pre-approve such a group is that it gives us as staff the flexibility that we need to rotate tasks among different consultants. It helps us with our responsiveness in completing a variety of engineering design tasks that come our way. And also it helps us to minimize any time with dealing with individual contracts for really small engineering or surveying tasks and always having to come before you to get those approved. So when we have a pre-selected, pre-approved group, then it makes us work a lot more efficiently. So with that in mind, we had an advertisement where we requested for statements of qualifications in 3 service areas: general civil engineering, general survey services, and geotechnical. If you might recall, in years past, we've had more service areas. We've had environmental, archaeological, we've had architectural, and water and wastewater, but those areas we did not move forward with because in the past we've done so, and it's always an administrative effort on our part to set those contracts up. We've never had any engineering or design tasks to provide to these consultants. And I know that the consultants also spend a good deal of time to prepare these statements of qualifications and get themselves ready for nothing that we really have to offer them. So we didn't include those areas this time around. And with just these 3 areas, we received 40 submittals from 30 different consulting firms. And once we received all these submittals, we had a 4-member review panel of city staff to review all of these. And the reason we have 4 is because we want to be objective. Different panel members have different perspectives on the construction, engineering, design, and experiences that we've had. And also it removes any perceptions of bias in the selection process. I mean, if it was just me reviewing them, if anybody gave me a Kit Kat bar every day for a year, you know, that might move them up the list, so to speak. We want to avoid anything like that. So the 4 members, we individually evaluated and reviewed and ranked the submittals that we had on our own. Then we met together as a group, and then we discussed and evaluated and shortlisted as a team those consultants that we wanted to move forward with. And we ended up with recommending 5 consultants in each of those 3 service areas. And they are listed here. A lot of these names are familiar to us. We've worked with them in the past. There's a few new names on there, which is great. I'm always up for having some new firms get in on the list. You'll notice in service area number 2, general survey services, there's a consulting firm that's been crossed out. And the reason for that is after they had submitted their statement of qualification for our advertisement, their firm has since closed the survey division here in Arizona. So in talking to them, they said they wouldn't be able to fulfill that. In discussing it with our group, we thought we will just move forward with the other 4. We didn't feel the need to get a 5th on board, so that's why you only see 4 in the 2nd service area. Budget implications, what does it mean for us? These consultant agreements will allow for, but it doesn't obligate us to to the following limits that you see on the screen. So for general civil engineering, it's capped at $300,000 per year per consultant. General survey services and geotechnical are both $100,000, and we haven't ever come anywhere near those limits in the past. The basic term of the agreement is that it's good for 3 years with the option for either party to terminate with 15 days written notice. And usually that's if there's a performance issue or a contractual issue that we can't resolve, then that gives us an option to do that. But in the time that I've been here, a little over 10 years, the city has never had to exercise that option with any of our consultants. So our staff recommendation is, and you'll see this on the consent agenda in a couple of weeks on November 20th, is we respectfully request that mayor and council approve our on-call consultant recommendations, and then we can move forward with those. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments.
Questions? I actually have one for Bryant. Bryant, in the effort to streamline Parks and Rec or planning, do they use these same folks? And is there any way we can, if we give one a contract here, to streamline it or combine them?
Absolutely, they can use them if we need them for any type of architectural or engineering for the whole city.
So once they're working for them, then they are at our...
They're ours, yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
So you would just rotate though, I mean, as, you know, there's 4 or 5 on each category, and so you would just be a rotating factor, or how does that?
Mayor Surdy, Councilmember Struble, correct, we would rotate those. We try to balance them out. Sometimes, you know, one project may be budget heavy as opposed to another project. So we try our best to equal those out as we can. So we'll rotate them around and make sure everybody gets their fair share.
And so I was reading through the contracts, because I had nothing really better to do yesterday than read all these contracts. What's the difference between 2 and 3, the survey and the, what's the
Geotech?
yeah, what's the difference between those? Because it seemed like the contract was kind of pretty much the same verbiage on.
Yeah, the Mayor, council member, the contracts are pretty much identical with between each of the 3 service areas. There's an exhibit in the back that
Yeah.
defines the scope of what each individual service area
Yeah,
does.
it seemed like they were kind of the same though, but.
Well, the difference between the general survey and the geotechnical is the general survey does land surveying, boundary surveys, topography survey, right-of-way acquisitions and things of that nature. Geotechnical deals with soil studies,
Okay.
underground and things like that. So slightly different.
The verbiage seemed the same, but who knows? Okay.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emil.
Presentation and discussion on consideration of award for project, big long number, Idaho Road reconstruction.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Good evening. Shane Kiesel, Public Works Manager. Just beginning here tonight, this, just in the sake of transparency with government too, this is a major amendment to our street maintenance plan with the addition of this Idaho reconstruction. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what our plan is with this amendment, what will change in our street maintenance plan. And then essentially what is being discussed, presented here tonight is for consideration of award scheduled for tomorrow night. And I'll explain why we're in a bit of a hurry with this project. And I know you can't see this, but you can see the general why of the area, and this is the map I shared with you actually last spring, so I gave you 11 by 17, so if you still have that, feel free to whip it out right now, and I'll give you a gold star if you do that. But just to show you is, if I could get my mouse, it's gonna be this portion of Idaho up here in the northern limit by Prospector Park. What we're gonna do is push the overlay project of Ironwood right here, as well as the slurry seal of the arterials for Old West Highway, portions of Tomahawk and Southern Avenue to the first half of next fiscal year to make room for this project. And why are we doing that? We do have a better idea of what some timelines with some upcoming grants. And for them to really engage in effective design without doing any rework, we really need to have the road in its ultimate condition, meaning elevation. So if we get it reconstructed, it'll be at that survey-ready stage for a near-future grant, which may include some bike lanes, for example, that would be off on the shoulders, for example, up to Prospector Park. So we didn't anticipate that happening this fiscal year. We thought we'd have some more time, but we know that, so if we get this redone in preparations of that near-future grant. And you can see that is the actual picture of Idaho Road taken a couple weeks ago, so you could actually, the condition too warrants it itself for reconstruction. What we're looking at for a scope is much like what we did on baseline, so this is actually a picture of the pulverization of baseline that took place, I think a little bit over a year ago. So it's gonna be the same process, what we call a full depth reclamation, FDR. They pulverize the existing asphalt right into the base. One thing that's a little bit different though is we're gonna actually treat it then after they pulverize it with a cement. So instead of actually ripping the road out, putting the traditional AB in, we're gonna actually put cement into the base that will have the crushed up existing pavement underneath the road bed. And this is an effective means to do a road quite a bit quicker than a traditional method and quite a bit cheaper. If we were doing the traditional reconstruction on this road, we'd be talking close to 3 times the amount of what we're looking at for doing this pulverization in place. Project time frame, we're looking at, as I mentioned, looking at a possible consideration of award tomorrow night, and we're doing that on purpose to try to get the project done within December, latest January, because you know how busy things get around Prospector Park in February. So we're trying to get this project done so that won't get no.
This is one of the most asked about sections that I get anyway, is when are we gonna fix this? And
Yep.
it's very rough up there. I think anybody hauling old couches, it makes them jiggle off and fall off the side of the road up there for some reason.
And beds.
So what are you gonna do about the dip?
Yeah, there is some wet crossings up on the north part. So we will make sure we shape it to keep the wet crossing as
So that
is,
it flows
keep the
off,
water from
okay.
floating off.
Hopefully not into the park.
Hopefully not into the park. And some of that degradation up on the north part too is because it is a wet crossing. But hopefully with this, we'll be able to still make sure we keep the water moving off the shoulders, which will help quite a bit. So in conclusion here, just consideration of award, and this is for tomorrow night, and an award would be to Sunland Asphalt. It's for a not to exceed $566,000 and some change there, and that includes a 10% contingency for unforeseens. And again, our goal is really to accomplish this before February.
And so if later in the future we get the grants and whatever to do the bike lanes, are we gonna do work right now to make that project a lot easier, or is there gonna have to be some road, tear up some of the road and stuff to allot for the bike lanes and such?
Mayor, Councilmember Struble, that is correct in your first part, that it will make the near future projects easier. However, with some near future projects, oftentimes if you add curb gutter, you do tear up a portion of the road. As you all know, Idaho is not in good shape, even south of Lost Dutchman. So if we tear up the road, I hope we tear up the whole road and replace it new again. But yeah, there is a chance we still might have some tear up, but this project is an effort, so we don't have to redo some of that later work later.
Is that all the questions? Thank you. I think people will be pleased with this. Presentation and discussion with progress made with the Pinal County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. Shane again.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Good evening. My name's Shane Kiesel, Public Works Manager, and I know you all know me, but we need to place our names before we present each time. So thank you. Let's talk the hazard mitigation plan. This is a Another one of those 300-page planning documents. No worry, this presentation is not going to be covering 300 pages, but part of the maintenance of this planning plan is to give a periodic update to the city council as part of its maintenance plan. This maintenance plan, most recent, was adopted just this last year. It's a collaborative all hazards approach, meaning natural hazards as well as man-made hazards such as terrorism. FEMA requires an update of this plan every 5 years, so as you can see with that, it's very much a proactive document, a working document to be used as such as a planning document to have progress be made with the plan. And just a refresher, objectives of the hazard mitigation plan is to reduce or eliminate those hazards to people and property, critical facilities and infrastructure. It doesn't mean public infrastructure. A lot of the critical facilities we have, a good majority is actually on the private side. Promote hazard mitigation through our planning, our hazard assessments, inventory condition assessments. Increase that public awareness of all these hazards, and as well as education among the city, but also with the general public. And when you go into the plan, you'll see, actually 2/3 of the way into the document, there's some pages specifically to Apache Junction, and we have some specific mitigation measures as part of the planning process that we identified as part of this version of the hazard mitigation plan. So I'll go through quickly with some of these. Again, this is just a very broad brush, or I could be talking up here for a long time, so just to give you a flavor of our progress here in the last year or so. Public awareness and education, you've seen it specifically even with this last monsoon season. We do make an effort to do joint news releases with the fire district, for example, when it comes to the hazards, when it comes to the monsoon season. Also, with our use of social media, we've increased a lot when it comes to our tools with social media, and you saw that probably a lot with this active monsoon season this last year, and we still look for opportunities to get that word out. Public Works is working with our PIO, El Bravo, quite a bit on how we could refine and get the word out better when it comes to these hazards. Also, another one is private non-government involvement, and I think we made pretty good progress on this the last 2 years in involving more of those VOAD groups. What I mean by VOAD is those volunteer organizations that are active in disasters. That's VOAD. Oftentimes with a disaster that occurs, the city will not have the resources. So what will happen is most of those resources spent are actually from VOAD groups. And they definitely are looked upon as an important group to have in the hazard mitigation, emergency management planning. And we've done that with our own internal working groups, with including the school district, SRP, the fire district, also Banner with local hospital in town, their emergency manager. But there's always room for improvement with that, and that's one area that we could still have some opportunity to include in our planning processes. New technologies. A couple things we've been looking at here lately is our emergency notification systems. The city has looked at a couple different community emergency notification systems. One that's based in Maricopa County, and that's nearer to us, but then there's also one that Pinal County pens, Pinal County Emergency Notification System. So we're currently in the process of looking at that. Also, more at a local organization, we've looked at emergency notification system, and I think some departments are actually actively looking at implementing that here, that would give mass notification to employees almost instantly with just a single text going out to folks. So those are examples of some of the technologies here that we're looking at and seeing what we could do to better our hazard mitigation and emergency management planning. Also in the plan, you'll see a lot when it comes to capability improvements, continuity of operations planning. I think that sort of dovetails a lot with process improvement in organization. We all recognize we're very small, so when it comes to cross-training individuals, et cetera, to handle events when people drop out for some reason is very important. So I've seen a lot of movement with the different departments doing what I just mentioned. Also increasing training when it comes to NIMS training, for example, National Incident Management System training. Also, at the end of this week, we have web EOC training. It's called. It's a new type of internet-based emergency operations center tool where you could have a connection to the web EOC on a remote device, which will allow a lot of participants to not necessarily be in the emergency operations center, but actually start getting aware of a situation and actually doing those communication and having access to those resources real time off of their mobile device. So we have that, made some good movement on that this last year. Also, our emergency response recovery plan, or emergency operations plan, oftentimes called. In the last couple of years, we updated our emergency operations center operations plan. We just had a training a couple months ago to roll that out to the main planning and section chiefs of city staff here in the last couple months. Also, we've moved forward with starting the revision of the ERP, being that it hasn't been revised since 2006, so about 12 years. We're well overdue to get that updated, and we've started that here in this last year. Stormwater master plan is also identified in their hazard mitigation plan as a measure. We've been trying to find the money to budget to get this study redone. It's dates back to 2002. It's a plan that looked at all of the different drainage issues that we had within the city. We recognize over just a matter of a handful of years to 10 years, water hydraulics could change quite a bit. So some of us are anxious to relook at that, but we're still trying to find the right opportunity, right funding to be able to make that happen. So that's still on the to-do list there yet. Also, the transportation plan is in the hazard mitigation plan. I think what we've done lately with the active transportation planning is going to be a big part of that, and will actually help refine some of those critical infrastructure and those facilities, those routes within the hazard mitigation planning network. So that's a good example. Also, a big thing is the hiring of a GIS coordinator in the last couple of years. GIS is a huge tool when it comes to hazard mitigation planning as well as emergency management with the capability that GIS tool brings us. Also, we have specific projects in the hazard mitigation plan. One of them is the Palm Wash crossing at 16th Avenue. That's currently a wet crossing, probably sees our most traffic. So during a rain event, if we have a wet water rescue, that's probably where it's going to be at. That's another thing that we haven't found the money for yet, but Public Works is actively still keeping an eye out for any grant opportunities we have or other alternative revenues we might have to make that happen. Also, that second bullet point, drainage channel improvements, you've probably seen Public Works doing a lot of work along the Delaware Ditch this last year. Also over at the detention at 2nd Avenue and Tomahawk, which performed really well this last monsoon season, but yet there's still some maintenance and repairs we still need to do yet at that detention. We have some gabion baskets we installed off of Palm Wash, Southern Avenue in Delaware that you probably have seen to help protect some private and public property, as well as Delaware Road, our infrastructure over there off of Palm Wash. Also, storm drains. Public Works has been very active, proactive, especially since Mr. Weaver has joined us. He's turning out to be the drainage guru among all of us staff, so I definitely like the attention that he's bringing to a lot of these drainage things within Apache Junction. So I'm very happy to have him and bringing more active planning when it comes to storm drain and other detention locations. Every opportunity he identifies, sees, he pursues it, knowing that we got some issues with drainage that we need to get done. Backup power generators. Again, we're very active here lately with the city, looking at what we could do with generators on our buildings to support the infrastructure we need to operate during emergency and recovery modes with the city. Also, AJ Water has made a lot of movement too with their generators, with all the wells, making sure they keep pressure in the system when power is out for longer periods of time. And then also inventory condition assessments. A big thing, part of that is the community wildfire prevention plan, another planning document that we added. Something that's going to be very useful as we move forward with protecting those natural fire breaks that we have, those rural arterial roads that we have out on the exterior.
Where do we have backup generators now?
For AJ Water, I believe it's all of the wells except well number 6 is the last one. And well 6 is down by baseline by the.
What about long-term with PD dispatch?
They do have, Mayor, they do have a backup generator. However, we did have a power outage early on the monsoon, and we found there's a couple pieces of equipment that we're gonna be trying to rewire to make sure they get backed up on the generator as well. It seems like every time we have a outage event, we find something that, was added, or something that was missed that needs to be added to the generator. Public Works also has a generator too that performed great this last monsoon season. And then right now we're actively looking at what generator options we have for City Hall, recognizing this is the brain of the network, that hub that goes through City Hall that feeds different departments, including Public Works. So when the lights go out here, some of our capabilities, for example, of Public Works, goes out.
Except for the city attorney's office.
That's right.
Yeah.
Keep them in the
You
dark.
could run an
them in
extension
the dark.
cord in there for them.
Yeah, it will be fine.
And that is just a quick, like I said, very quick, just to give you a flavor of
Go ahead.
what we've been doing the last year when it comes to some of those items within the hazard mitigation plan. So if there's any other further questions.
I do have a question. So if people were to, you mentioned that some of this information can be texted out to employees. If community members were looking for some information, is this on our website, or where could they go to get some of this information?
Yes, we've made the hazard mitigation plan accessible on the website. Also, it's a multi-jurisdictional plan that's under Pinal County, so I know it is. I think our website might have a link to where they have the document, I think is the way it goes. And that's one thing I think we could look at too, because I know I have some other planning, or we have some other planning documents in there too, and it may be buried, and that's one thing I usually try to look for, is try to make sure something isn't buried in there that's accessible, easy to
That was
find.
kind of my question, is if we had a way to, if there was some kind of a link that is easily accessible.
We certainly can get that out, and I think one of the places others in our community look at is our official social media avenues, like the official City of Apache Junction Twitter account, the official City of Apache Junction Facebook account. So already folks use that a lot, and that's what Shane was talking about earlier with working with Al.
Definitely, those go out exponentially.
Any more questions?
Just try pictures next time to make it a little more colorful, would you?
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Shane.
Good update.
Presentation and discussion on proposed ordinance 1466 regarding the municipal court and home monitoring. Judge Hazel.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have with me tonight Kelly Cutright. He's our bailiff, but he's done a lot of work on the home monitoring proposal and coordinated all these. He's here tonight with the different devices that he's going to pass around to you that you can look at. I've never done this with a PowerPoint before. Is mine available on the, how do you click that up?
Matt, so where's it at right now, Judge?
It's on the agenda thing. I can't see it, so.
Part of the- yeah, it is
Yeah.
part of the
Matt can
packet.
run it from there.
Yeah, if he could run the PowerPoint.
Good job.
Matt, it's on Legistar. Yeah, I remember seeing it.
Yeah, it was,
There you- no,
so
this one, yep.
Yep, that's it.
I have submitted a written proposal for you. See the screen from here? Yeah. And I'll try to make this brief. What we're here tonight for is to discuss a proposed ordinance that will allow the city to use electronic monitoring home detention. State law requires that city council authorize that for us to be able to use it. And through the tremendous assistance of the city attorney's office, we have drafted an ordinance that'll come back to you on November the 20th. So if, Matt, if you could jump to the next slide for me. And I wish I could read them, but I can't. But, and I'll just skip through. Maybe we could skip through to the pictures of the two different devices. That would be good. Okay, Kelly, would you start passing one end? This is an electronic monitoring device. The purpose of this device is it's placed on a person's ankle, and then it will allow the city staff to track the location of this particular person. This would be used in situations for public safety. First, if we wanted an exclusion zone for someone, a situation where there was a situation where we didn't want a person accused of a crime or a defendant to be able to go near a reported victim, we would create an exclusion zone around that person, and if the perpetrator was alleged to enter that area, then we would get alerts, and then we could make contact with the police department to respond appropriately and give notification to victims. Also, it's if people don't appear in court, we can send them messages, or we can get a hold of them. We know where they're at. So that's the purpose of that device. We have another device that we're going to pass along as well. This is an alcohol monitoring device that allows a person to, Kelly's going to blow into it, show you how it works. I can assure you he hasn't been drinking, but he'll pass it along to you. That allows a person to, when prompted, without, it is not a scheduled prompt. It means that you're not doing it 12, 6, and 10. It's when you get a message, when the defendant gets a message, they have to blow into the device to determine they have not been drinking. Those are for people who have had DUIs or other alcohol-related incidents and are prohibited from consuming alcohol. The system generates a automation message to them at different times to check their alcohol status. There's also another device that we didn't bring with us that allows a person to wear that on their ankle, and if they've consumed alcohol, it would be able to tell that based by the perspiration that is coming out of their body. It would tell if they've consumed alcohol. So there's a variety of different devices. So,
Judge?
yes.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, you can always ask a question.
Is this a camera so that you know who, just, you can't randomly blow in? Okay.
Have somebody else do it.
Yes, it has a facial, you're talking about the alcohol monitor device. I wasn't sure what you had.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Right, you have to identify yourself. So if,
We'll get an alert when it's.
So it takes a
if
picture
a
of
family
who's ever
member
blowing in.
had one of those, they couldn't pass it on to another family member to be able to blow. That's correct. That's why there's a camera in there.
Well, I was looking at it, just looks
Yes.
like a camera. Maybe it's a
Yes,
camera.
it is a camera.
So on the bracelet where you say it
Kelly's
protects,
putting it on now.
so on the bracelet that you say it protect, you know, the defendant, it will tell you if the defendant is close to or nearby somebody. Is that just based on where they live, or,
Right.
or
You have
how?
to put the address in. Let's say a person lived at 100 North Valley,
Yeah,
and the court decided that a person should not be able to go within a half mile of 100 North Valley,
of the residents.
of that residence at 100 North.
But if the person's out and about in town or something, I mean,
That probably
it has
wouldn't help
nothing to
us,
do with
but
it.
if they had two locations, like a work location, like 300.
Yeah, they could do that.
supervision,
Okay.
we could also put it in for those particular times.
For technology-wise, is there a way for, like, let's say there's abuse, you know, and that's why you're trying to keep the defendant away from a person, for the person to have some kind of a monitor so that the two will communicate so that he or she couldn't get too close to the other person?
So are you asking if they would be able to call the police, or
No, no.
are we able
It
to
would
notify
just
them
alert
that the
you.
person's too close?
No, let's say one spouse was abusing another spouse.
Okay.
And you wanted the spouse A to stay away from spouse B, and you put in the residence and maybe job location. And so the one person couldn't go near them, but is there technology where the spouse B could have something in their handbag or backpack that would tell the closeness of the two so that there wouldn't get close, you know, if they were walking down the street or something like that?
Judge, can you speak in the microphone?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Does that make sense? Does that question make sense?
Kelly, do you remember that from the presentation? I remember them being able to do that, but it's just what you wish to pay for. There's
Yeah.
a lot of technology.
Yeah.
And all this is worked off cell phone towers as
Right.
well as GPS satellites.
Yeah.
So as the pictures indicate, there's a lot of information that is gathered. We didn't bring tonight the ability to, so not to take so much time, to show you how this works, where when they brought it to the court for the presentations to different vendors, we were able to actually track real people, and
Yeah.
it's amazing the information that they have and the location. I remember them showing us, hey, we can see this person is in their bedroom.
Yeah.
Not at a house, but in their bedroom.
Yeah.
And how long they've been there and all that information. So I know one of the questions we had about it is, can the person wear it non-discreetly? And it can be worn non-discreetly. And again, nobody is forced to wear these. This is a voluntary thing in lieu of jail. Anybody is welcome to have the services of the county jail if they want. The purpose of this program is to give people other alternatives, but also reduce the city's jail cost. As my materials indicated, we're spending $340,000 a year on jail costs. The cost of this program is quite a bit less. And so the goal of the program is to reduce city's liability to Pinal County.
Judge?
Going to ask a question and the aspect on it. And of course, you have to remember where I used to work at the Boeing facilities several years ago. And this way I understand it, the person could wear this and go to work.
Yes, as long as they were not an underwater diver.
Yeah, okay.
You can't wear it underwater. You can get a shower with it, but you can't submerge it, meaning you could
Okay.
jump in and jump out, or fall in and fall out, or
What would happen if the individual is employed in an area where the building is totally protected from, I would say, any, I'll say, extremely or way of monitoring anybody into it, because electronically it's protected?
if it's an electronically blocked building,
Yes,
they would probably have to meet with Kelly, say, I work at a secure location, whatever that is, that blocks all cell and satellite communication.
right.
And then Kelly would have to determine the amount of time that they were there each day, their work schedule, and then put that into the module. Of course, once they stepped out of the building, then they would be reactivated. So the machine is not, the equipment is not turned off. It would show where they last were. So if where you are is the secure location and where I am is not, then my last movement would be here, and then we would step into the building. So that's how that would work. But they would have to have that discussion with him to make sure that we knew it was not being cut off or being dropped somewhere.
Okay.
Judge?
Kelly,
You know, if it's a situation, hopefully I have open communication with any of the victims, and they can report to me that, hey, I ran into so-and-so at Fry's, you know, would cross paths. Hopefully that, you know, they're communicating to me and that's not happening. So, and you know, the software technology is very advanced. So they've got a lot of different options that they can do with it.
One
Judge?
thing I didn't mention, I'm sorry, Kelly is a retired federal U.S. probation officer.
Whoa.
Robin?
He has a lot of
Yeah,
experience.
Judge, you said that the city staff would know where people were, et cetera, so who's going to be monitoring this?
It would be, a person's at the court, it would be Kelly, and then Brittany Kimball, our community programs coordinator, they're working together on that.
So there is no need for another hire?
No, we're not gonna specifically hire a person for this. We have to see how it goes over time and see what savings we accomplish and see where it's worthwhile. But no, at this point, we're not asking for another position. And the idea behind this is not a program that should cost the city any money, because we're already spending the money on jail costs. The idea is
Right.
that we would just be transferring to something that's cost 20% of the cost.
What about at night? I mean, there's not going to be somebody at a monitor at night, right?
They would receive alerts.
From the company. It's
Yeah,
like an
yeah.
off-site then contacts you. You don't directly see it.
Software.
You can look at it on the computer. They can go on the computer, and everybody, every morning, can see, okay, our devices are all working. This is where the folks are at. They're supposed to be working. They're at those locations.
But at 3 o'clock in the morning, if somebody does something they're not supposed to be doing, there's somebody monitoring it to
Yeah,
notify
there's
the,
24-hour monitoring, and and
Right.
Kelly or Ms. Kimball would be notified.
Would be notified.
Yeah, so if we had a situation
Oh.
where the device was cut off, removed, yes, we would be immediately notified.
So Kelly's salary? Or hourly, or how does that work?
Kelly is hourly at this time.
Okay. Judge, if, you have no way of really knowing, but how many of these do you think we might have out at one time? And is there a limit? I mean,
No,
will it,
the difference between our program and other programs, and I need to mention that even though I know you reviewed the materials. Other city programs, the way they work, you have a person that wants to be on the program, they go to the vendor in Phoenix and sign up, and they pay all the cost. The problem with a program like that with the city of Apache Junction is that only the persons that have transportation and enough funds to prepay the program and ever participate. Therefore, it does not address our cost as it relates to people in the county jail. Our program would be done regardless of the person's ability to pay up front, but an assessment against them, just like jail costs or other things would, that we can recoup. Because obviously, the way I look at it, if we spend $17 a day for the device versus $100 a day for the jail, we're still $83 ahead if everything works out the same. So that's where I see the benefit to it, is the cost. So the city would buy these devices and have them. Persons who went on the program would agree that if they were destroyed the devices, that they would be responsible for their cost, besides the possible crime of criminal damage or interfering with government operations by destroying one. And so they'd have an incentive not to do that. The vendors have told us that there is a very low destruction or cutoff rate. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. We're going to start slow, but in our community, we would think anywhere between 10 to 15 people at any given time would be on it. And they're all reusable. There's nothing about them that if I used one, it would have to be thrown in the trash. The belt itself would be cut off and not used again, but the expensive equipment would be used again. So it's not like everyone has to buy a new device. It's just
Krista?
So generally, we would see probation departments that handle this, and they would have several staff members that are able to monitor. You've already given a figure of about 340,000 that we are spending on jail.
I believe it was 343,000.
340, okay.
Somewhere in that area.
And you said that there would be a cost savings of how much approximately?
Well, the cost of the device versus the cost of the jail is 1 to 5. So for any $20 you spend on the device, you pay $100 for jail.
And then you said that you want to just start out slow, so approximately 12 people, and 2 people would be monitoring those 12 people.
Right, it's not a full-time job.
And they get alarms.
Hopefully people will cooperate so that they're not required to be,
Yeah.
you know.
But they would get, so 2 people approximately would be monitoring approximately 12 individuals, and they would just get alerts. They're not necessarily, like you said, watching a camera 24 hours a day.
Well, they would go on in the morning, log in, make sure that it was working properly, that everything that they were getting it charged. These things have to be charged. You can send messages to them to be charged. If everything looks in order, then you're pretty good to go. If we get alerts from the company, then we will deal with them accordingly, and we've discussed that at our office, and we can certainly handle that.
So they have, it would be like a cell phone notification or whatever notification that the 2
They
people
get
would.
messages saying the battery needs to be charged, there's lights on it, and we would have cell phone numbers for them to get a hold of them.
Okay.
In the software.
And at what point, you said approximately, again, just an estimate, you're gonna, maybe 12 people. At what point do you think that, if this program were to really do well, which we hope it's successful and takes off well, and, but at what point would you feel that we would need somebody else to help monitor? How many, number-wise, how many people do you think that 2 people could monitor successfully? And
I don't think we're anywhere clear of that number. I'm sure that the numbers that we have in the city of Apache Junction, we're not going to have a problem with that. I mean, I can't predict the future for you.
So it's a
And I
relatively
can't-
low.
I can't predict the success of each individual. Some people, as we discussed at other meetings, do like the security of the county jail. The county jail provides 3 meals a day, television, healthcare. This bracelet does not.
So from the historical patterns, though, you expect it to be relatively low and not need anybody anytime soon to be able to help monitor?
No, and if there was any persons that we needed to get, first of all, we have to use the system, see if it works. And then if it's successful and we need to do something else in the program, I would only expect it to be self-sustaining. This is never a thing where it's gonna, because why have it if it's gonna cost us more money, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Why hire 10 people that would cost us twice the amount of the jail room? There's no logic to that.
So we'll just learn as we go at what point we would,
Right.
we
it's a
would
new
need
thing.
additional
One of
help.
the vendors provides the services to Pinal County now. Others are more other cities, but yeah, we have to see how it works, how our group of people use it, and whether they're successful with it. That's what we want. Money is limited. The jail is expensive. The cost of that facility will continue to rise. So.
I can tell you on average, what I've seen nationally is a home confinement caseload will get up to about 30, as high as 35 cases.
Per
you know,
person to,
for a probation officer, yeah. So I've seen them monitor cases about that high. They don't get into 40 or 50. That's more general supervision.
okay,
So that's kind of what I've seen throughout
thank you.
the state.
On
That's
the-
kind of what I was looking for, thank you.
On the other device, I apologize if I skipped over it, but are there any other substances that will set it off besides alcohol?
Currently, it's an alcohol monitoring device. So if the city's interested in us in exploring those, remember, most of our cases are alcohol-related. They're not serious drug-related cases because if you're involved in those type of issues, those would be felonies.
Felony.
You'd be on felony probation with the probation department in Pinal County. So, but it's something that we could look at if we need to, as the laws change. The law is always in a state of flux, and so if all drug offenses, for example, become misdemeanors and they're brought into our court system and we're asked to deal with that, I may have to come back and talk to you about that.
Yes.
You had mentioned the aspect that they could monitor it to see that the battery was charged, need to be recharged.
Yes.
Would they have to come somewhere and have it charged, or how is that done?
You plug it in, it's just like charging your cell phone.
So is there a
Show
mon,
you the little hole there.
There's a port right there, straight into
okay,
your electrical.
so is a monitor on it, will tell them when it's low, or do you have to contact it?
It has about a 36-hour charge.
Okay.
Gail?
I have a little bit of confusion because this said that it was for misdemeanors
That's all we handle at our court.
and, right, and alcohol. So does everyone that gets one of those be on an alcohol charge and get one of those? Or were they two separate programs?
They're two separate devices. It depends on the case. The more serious
you
the
could-
case, the greater supervision the person will probably need. So a first-time alcohol DUI case probably would not need one. One that had a very high blood alcohol level, and this would be subject to input of the city attorney and the city prosecutor. They may want them on greater monitoring. Or a person that has a very extreme blood alcohol level. And so that would do that, but they would be used for different purposes, I think is what you're asking me. This
Right.
is to make sure that we know where the person is, get them to court. The alcohol device is to make sure that they're not drinking as a condition of their probation or their terms of release on their alcohol case or their sentence, and to make sure that society is safe, that people aren't drinking and continue to drive, because if they're drinking when they can't, not allowed to, we know that. And that's why they have those type of devices.
Okay, so they could have both, but they could have just one, too?
Absolutely.
This could be a domestic violence case where you just want to make sure that the person is staying out.
Stays away.
Right. It could be both.
Okay. So, now, at the bottom of page 1, it said that if we adopted this and the person didn't have the ability to pay, then the city picks up the pay, correct? Which is still less than what the jail cost is. I get that.
Okay. I'm looking at the note, so I just want to read it.
Okay, yeah, it's the last
Okay,
paragraph on page 1.
okay.
The numbers that were stated above it, that we budget for 290, but we spend 343, is that for everyone or just this type of case?
This is how much we pay for people that are out of our court. We budget,
I was just confused on how we budget 290 and spend 343.
that would be a question for the city manager. I can only tell you what the finance numbers were and the bills, and we calculated the
Sure.
bills.
Yeah, the city budget is a guesstimate of what our anticipated costs will be. The actual costs have been rising over the years from Pinal County. It's one of the biggest concerns we have, is that we continue to have overages in this budget line item. It doesn't mean we overspent in the entire court budget.
I was kind of
Yeah.
trying to figure out how those numbers came into place, because this is of a huge cost saving,
Yeah.
even if the city had to pick up the cost for those that couldn't afford it, which, how do you determine who can and
As
can't?
with any Indigee application, they fill in an application, we review it. There's a state form that's mandated that persons are required to fill in. It's reviewed by our payment specialist, Robin White. She's our financial compliance specialist, and she looks at that. She has access to financial data that you or I wouldn't have access
Sure.
on individuals, and then she would make a determination. She does a very good job of making sure that people who can pay do pay, and people that don't have that ability, she does a complete background and reports that back to the court.
Okay, and, because it stated that the average cost to replace is $1,500, and I could see that be an issue for a lot of people.
Right, and that's why we hope, and we will explain that to them, or Kelly would explain that to them, and that's why they don't want to break it or cut it off or throw it in a dumpster somewhere.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
We won't pick up that cost.
yeah. So,
We don't pick
and we will have protocols in place to retrieve these, to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, I really don't want to go in a dumpster, but
No,
But
that-
we will have a program that, during retrieval times, that it'll be a team effort so that all city staff is safe.
but just to
Krista?
follow up on Councilmember Evans' question. So if we deem that they can't afford to pay for the daily monitoring, the $17, I'm assuming is that, can we deny them the option because we don't think they can afford to pay for the broken device if they choose to break it? Can we deem to do that?
Well,
or-
the court can always make a determination that a person is not subject or not qualified to be on this type of
Okay.
program, and then they would go to the county jail.
Okay,
So when we do that, though, then we incur the $100
I
plus
know,
cost.
I know.
So- Right, but yes,
Okay.
if a person had a history of
Available.
destroying property or doing things like that, then we'd have to make a determination.
yeah. Because they might be a flight risk or anything else like that anyway.
That's correct.
Great.
And obviously, we'd have input of the city prosecutor if he indicates, or she, whoever it was at the particular time, said, this is not a person that we comfortable, then obviously would defer to them as well.
So at that point, you wouldn't even give them the application to apply because you would already have the information that they're not, for whatever reasons. You couldn't disqualify them for financial reasons, though. I
No,
saw
I
Joel.
don't think I would. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. That
Yeah.
would defeat the purpose of the program, because we're
Exactly.
trying to keep people out of the county jail and the costs associated with that.
Yeah, I had seen Joel nodding, that's why I was,
Well, however, if I may, Mr. Mayor, Krista, or Councilman Rizzi, if there's a history, and I can let Eric speak to this, but my policy would be, if there's a history of an individual who likes to break things and has a record of criminal damage, then we're probably not going to recommend this, and because we don't want to take the risk. And so they're going to go to jail, and that's what we would do. Or they would be under the jail scenario where they would have to go through the other program that the judge has. So we would watch that, and we would advise the court accordingly.
so another question that I had, worst case scenario, 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody cuts it off. what happens? How does that dealt with? How is a violation dealt with? Whether they make contact with somebody they're not supposed to in a domestic violence, they cut it off, how do we deal with a
Okay,
violation?
well, that's the scenario that we were through at the court. Kelly and Brittany are both gonna have coverage time, and they'll have to make the appropriate response, probably be getting a hold of me,
Referral will be made to the,
then contacting the police as necessary, once we find that out. I spoke to Chief Kelly about this, and we would respond, and we'd have a protocol to respond and do it quickly. We're not going to allow these things to happen unattended. It's just like any other function that I serve here at the city. If I'm needed by police, my phone goes off and it says police, and I answer it. And it'll be dealt with, or Kelly will get right on it and take care of it regardless of the time. I'm not really worried about that. It's a small city that we have to deal with in land area, so if something's going on, we'll be able to deal with it quite quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think we've talked this about the death. So how committed will we be if we go into this? Does it have to be, I mean, how much of a sample can we do? Or how easy to,
Talking about the outlay financially to begin with?
yeah, or
where the
how easy to, hey, that's not working, how do we get out of it? How easy is that?
Well, the funding for this is going to come from court probation funds that we've accrued over time. There's going to be no general fund money going into this, so I'm not going to go to Brian or Mr. Powell or Mr. Busby and say, hey, I need $15,000 advance on the jail bill to buy this stuff. We have funds that we have accumulated over time, and there's plenty of money to buy 5 or 6 of these devices.
But if they don't work though, I mean, you just send them back and we're out.
Send them back. If
Yep,
they're in
okay.
good shape, we can send them back, and they would refund the money to court. We could put it back into the court fund.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. So,
Okay.
anyone else?
Sounds good.
Moving on. Presentation and discussion on bid responses received for public defender services. Judge Hazel again.
Thank you. This will be a little bit quicker help for you all. If you recall, back at the early part of the year, I was here to ask for rescission of a bid process that didn't quite work out the way we wanted to, and with the assistance of the city attorney's office, we were able to get the proposals rebid for contract public defender services. As I've told you on past occasions, Arizona law requires that we provide lawyers to persons accused of crimes who are either facing jail time or face the possibility of being on probation with the possibility of facing jail time. In our ever-changing society, that's an ever-grading larger number of people. And our court systems, our Supreme Court, is always expanding the number of people we have to provide services for. And so based on that, we did bid proposals this fall. We had a response to that bid proposal. There were several applicants, and we've chosen 3 after interviewing them to provide those services to us. And this is going to come back also on the 20th. And the amount I put in the proposal, which is $2,225 per month, annualized, over the year period, and they would provide these services to the court on a scheduled basis based on their ability to work. But they'd all do equal amounts, and that's how we've done it in the past. We are adding one other person based on budget levels that we received last year, just because of the increased caseload and increased requests for lawyers that are required again by law to appoint. Again, and to speak on that, the way a person gets a lawyer, they would come in. Mr. Yuva provides us a list before court telling us what people may qualify for an attorney, or what people are what's called require a waiver. That means either they have to get a public defender or they have to waive their right to have an attorney. He provided that list to us today. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we have 41 cases set. I believe, if I'm correct, and Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, 17 of those people are eligible on paper for the appointment of an attorney tomorrow. So I'll have that discussion with them. Not all of them want one. They may agree to waive and talk to him, but that just gives you a perspective of the amounts. And if they want an attorney, then they will come back at a time when their attorney is there and take care of those matters.
Anyone else?
Yeah, question. So I'm reading through the public defender solicitation fact sheet, and it says allowable caseload, and it says no more than 165 defendants will be assigned to attorney. Is that 165 and per year, I guess?
Yes.
Is that
It's a
100?
requirement of Arizona Supreme Court decisions that limit the amount of cases that one attorney can have.
That one attorney. So if we have, whatever, 4 or 5 attorneys,
We'd have 3, so that would be 495.
and what happens if it goes above that? We need to,
We would need to re-examine it.
okay. And
Yeah,
so,
we would hope that that would not be the case. We have never went over those numbers,
okay,
and so we're good that way, but if we ever had a situation where that was the case, maybe the law changes. If the law changes that required every person to come to court,
or they
They have a
increase
lawyer?
yeah,
and there's a public push for that now,
right.
and that would be beyond our control. That would be the state Supreme Court ordering us that, or the United States Supreme Court ordering that, and then I would have to come back here and talk to you about that at the appropriate time.
Right. So that's set by the state's
Right,
regulations,
the higher court,
165.
yes.
That's
It's
not something
by
that we
us.
put in
We
there.
follow the laws as written at
Yeah,
any
okay.
particular time.
Wow.
I see no more questions, so thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have a good evening.
Presentation and discussion on the response to the city's notice for bid proposals for fee development study. Larry Kirch.
Good evening, council members. We have a short presentation.
Where is it at?
Well, it's either in here,
All right.
hopefully,
It is.
or it's also in the W drive,
I got
but
it, yeah.
does that look like a... There we go. Okay, so we did put out a request for proposals. Every 5 years, the city is required, wait a minute, okay, there we go. Every 5 years, the city is required to update its development impact fees. And so to do that, what we did is this will also include an update to Chapter 7. So not only do we have an infrastructure improvement plan, but there's also in our Volume 2 in our Code of Ordinances, Chapter 7, that's how we administer the development fees. So working with Joel's office and Public Works, we did post the request for proposals on the city's procurement website on a Saturday, October 6th. They closed on the 22nd. We had a 4-person panel. I did not get involved. I kind of coordinated the effort and took notes, but we had the Public Works Director, the Park and Rec Director, Anna McCrae was there, Assistant to the City Manager, and our new City Planner, Sydney Urias. So they went through the proposals. We had criteria that were in the proposals. We had 5 firms submitted. So last year, 5 years ago, we kind of did this as a sole source. So Bryant insisted, and I think it made sense that we kind of go see if people can sharpen their pencils, and in fact, they did. So we did get 5 firms. All of them, I would say 4 of them have had pretty extensive experience in development fees. 1 firm had extensive experience doing financial auditing of cities and that type of thing, but not exactly in development fees. So we did, it was a quality-based selection, so there were selection criteria, so it wasn't solely on cost, but it's, you know, what's your history, what's your track record, can you do the project on time, et cetera. The prices ranged. We had 2 that were pretty close. Duncan had done work for the city in the past, early on in this impact fee world, or development fee. Tischler Bice actually did them the last time. And then we had these 3 other firms. So a little bit of disparity in what they were offering. But those 4 folks ranked them and ended up choosing Tischler. So Tischler did them the last time. We're doing them slightly different. We have asked in that request for proposal to think about whether we might have a tiered system. So if we want to encourage development kind of in our downtown area, we might have a lower fee in that area. because it is closer to some city services, closer to the library, closer to the police station, et cetera. We might have one for north of baseline, we might have another set south, so that's not determined yet, but I think we do want to see if there are alternatives rather than just have one fee citywide. So we have it as a consent item tomorrow night. The way the RFP works is essentially when they make a proposal, they see the contract that they're already going to sign. So in that contract that was included in the RFP, we attach their scope of services and the not to exceed amount. And so our recommendation is to go with Tischler Bice. And so this will be coming back through the council at various times, very rigorous, if you will, in terms of statutory requirements and deadlines and notices, et cetera. Our goal is to have this wrapped up, I think, July, first part of July. So again, it's required every 5 years, and we're recommending Tischler.
I have one
Yes.
question. I think everyone except for Councilmember Struble was on the council the last time we did this. And I had some questions for them, and they said, well, we weren't asked to do it with the questions that I had, and it had to do with square foot and building type. Are we going to see how they're going to rank this before they actually do the work?
Sure, we can at the front end, if you have specific questions or how you think it should be done, again, there's really about 3 methodologies. The one that the city used in terms of square footage, it's easy to calculate because a building comes in at 1,000 square feet. The ordinance and everything says we measure the perimeter of the building. If you think you want to exclude restrooms or break rooms, I think they can do that, but those are things we would need to know. So if you remember what your questions were or how you think it could be approached, let us know. But in certain cases, it's level of service. So what's the level of service? Is vehicle mile travels or average daily traffic, et cetera, et cetera. For some of them, the methodology's there. So, but yeah, so let us know up front, and we will have kickoff meetings and invite folks to those if they have any questions, so we get started on the right foot. So that's all I have. I don't have any pictures for this presentation. We do for the next one, though.
Okay.
The next one, we actually have some bags of trash, some putrescible waste we're going to bring in, so
Larry,
instead of the monitors.
how long do you anticipate the next presentation to
break?
go? I was going to ask if
Yeah,
anybody would like a
that might be a
break.
good idea. We can do
Yeah,
that.
so we'll take a
Okay.
short break. Call the meeting back to order. And we have presentation and discussion on proposed amendments to Apache Junction City Code, Health Sanitation, Property Maintenance Standards. Larry and Dave.
Good evening, Mayor, Surdy, council members. So I'm going to try to go through kind of how we got here, what the, introduce the topic, kind of what the next steps are, go through, Dave's going to go through some of the staff recommendations. Primarily, our goal is to improve and fine-tune kind of what we already have in the code. So this one I did kind of doctor the vision and mission statement, but I do think it's apropos because I think if our mission really is to invest in quality of life, planned improvements, then I think what we're doing here in terms of improving code enforcement can improve quality of life, and people can recognize the community for what it is, its intrinsic beauty. So, and these are actual code cases that we have dealt with. These are not from another community. So we've had places where there's, 7 or 8 people living in the backyard and the neighbors call us and then they want us to spring into action. So sometimes these can be dealt with in, 21 days, and sometimes it takes, some of you have been involved in some of our cases where we're on them for years and years. So,
Looks like California.
could be. So this code, again, for some background, this was adopted by the council in 2006. So it's now about 12 years old, approaching 13, a teenager. Chapter 9, it covers property maintenance. It covers also garbage hauling, construction sites, how private recycling containers, solid waste collection. Tonight, we're really just dealing with property maintenance. So we're going to come back later with some work that ASU has done. We've talked about in the past about solid waste and recycling. So we're just doing property maintenance tonight, not how we haul or who's going to haul our waste. So there was a work session back in August of 2015. You may recall, I had it here a second ago, I handed out this MESA brochure I showed everybody. And I think our goal was, should we not at least look at what MESA does and maybe make our stuff as stringent as theirs? People do have a choice where they can live. And so if our code is a lot weaker, then I don't know, it just seemed to me it made sense for us to be at least as stringent as our neighbors. So you gave us direction to staff in January of 2017. I did want to say that this is a team effort with the 3 code officers. So with us tonight, if you haven't met them before, we have Kimberly Wilson and Rick Mattern, and Chad Cooper is our latest. So we had been operating with really 2.5 equivalents, if you will. As we've restructured the department, we did get permission to add another person, not a half a person, but we actually now have 3 full-time staff that are doing code enforcement. I think that has kind of helped with some backlog and improved our overall efficiency. So we do have some challenges with the way the code is constructed, and we'll get into that. There are, as you know, I think we spent, from what I understand, about 7 years on Roosevelt. So we finally, when we got going on it, it still took us a year. It took us writing things in Deutsch, in real German, not Dutch, but Deutsch. Getting the property donated to the city, getting the mobile home donated to the city. And so you have heard yourself here, I think, from neighbors who've come to the call of the public and say, can't we do something about X, Y, and Z property? Some of you recall you went to that Severar luncheon. I think we've had 2 of them with them. And a lot of them, the realtors stood up and said, when we show some houses in AJ, we have to figure out how to get there. So we have to drive these circuitous routes so they don't go by some of our lingering code cases. So a lot of stuff does impact where people choose to live and how realtors show their houses. So that's, I think, still kind of out there. So again, you've seen the slide before, but basically, why is code compliance important? It is part of our overall strategy to improve the community, kind of revitalize neighborhood. It does improve quality of life. We think that it is good for businesses. When property is on either side of the trail, you don't go too far from the trail, and you kind of see some things that need to be addressed. We think it helps promote property values and stabilize property values. We have heard folks who, they have a property next to them and they think their property value goes down because of what's happening. So This is a pro-property rights state. I believe in property rights, but property rights don't just end like at your fence line. You can impact what happens on your neighbor's property. We have seen folks taking apart RVs and then have that RV in a windstorm blow over to the neighbor. So they're dismantling these things at a next door neighbor's property, and these people have had to live with that stuff for years. Again, I think what this community's done in improving the community image, the projects we've done with ASU called Positively AJ, I think this all has us going in that same direction. And I think the work that we can do in code enforcement also reinforces your public expenditures, what you spend taxpayer dollars on. So if we're going to make downtown look nice, then we think the effort pays off in these neighborhoods as well. And we have, I think, a great working relationship with the police department, with the court system. Spent some, when the judge said he had 41 cases, if you've ever sat in the courtroom over there for 3 hours and they do 41 cases in a morning, and there's just a whole lot going on, and we have our code cases there, and you get an appreciation for, they don't always go our way, but I think I got a better appreciation on a recent code case as to what happens in the court, and the judges, I think, very good with what we have, and the same thing with the city prosecutor. As I said, this was a team effort. Joel helped us refine, review this thing. So it is an overall effort in the community. We've done some recent changes to the city website with public information officer when you go to request tracker. So it's not just, when you look at code enforcement, it's not just those three or Dave or I. It really is, it crosses departments. I just want you to kind of reiterate that. When we're looking at this, all departments, I think, are working together on this. So again, I think we're hoping that we can be at least as strict as some of our nearby neighbors. There's a couple points I wanted to make in addition to this. You know, a picture paints 1,000 words, so we could have added 1,000 pictures here tonight. In the interest of time, you've seen videos. I brought a video here once, and I showed you kind of really a sad case that we were dealing with. So, but I think we all recognize what the issues are, and we could have a lot of pictures, but what we're trying to do tonight is have a photograph that kind of illustrates the part of the code we're trying to address. The other thing I wanted to, this is going to be difficult, I know, for some of you, but I'd like to see if we can't get through the full presentation. I know you have an idea, write it down, or a question, write it down, but I think it'll be more efficient if we let Dave go through the full presentation. I know you're going to be dying to ask questions or interject or whatever. We can go back to any slide you want. So I think that way you kind of get the broad picture of what we're trying to do here.
And that may answer some of our questions.
And it may be in a subsequent slide. That often happens. So, all right. So I think that's it. I'm just going to turn it over to Dave now.
Good evening, Mayor Surtee and council members. I'm going to do kind of a high level of what the changes we've made, and then we'll go through them kind of line by line, hopefully not that intense. But as Larry mentioned, it has been noted through several meetings and discussions that the area bounded by the city limits of Apache Junction faces numerous image-related issues. And some of it has to do with the kind of things you see in the picture, bicycles, something in the process of being dismantled, that kind of thing. Many of the comments and concerns speak directly to how residential property is utilized and maintained. There are a large number of properties where keeping of debris, my eyes are getting funny, and trash is uncontrolled and offensive to one's visual senses and also to the olfactory senses. So we've had this type of situation. You see garbage in the trailer. That comes up quite a bit. So that's something we've tried to address in our recommendations. Additionally, there are a large number of residential properties where auto repair, auto salvaging, and auto storage exceed the level that you would typically associate with either regular auto maintenance or even a restoration enthusiast. In many cases, the same properties are havens for transients, see higher police call volume, and are linked to illegal drug activity. We see those intersections in a lot of the properties we've been dealing with, especially the ones that make our top 10 list and take the longest to resolve. So our recommendation to improve the city of Apache Junction's attractiveness, significant time and money have been spent on sidewalks, street lighting, streetscapes, and parks. These efforts to raise the city's profile and desirability can be quickly negated by seeing one of our many property maintenance violators. So this is the most recent one. We did get this one cleaned up over on Manzanita, but it was pretty painful, I think, for the neighbors to go through as we dealt with it. Just to kind of, Larry brought this up, we have restructured some things over the last 4 years. We restructured the division, more dedicated code compliance officers are not splitting time behind the counter, and then also trying to do code enforcement. They are strictly code enforcement. And we've improved the way we handle cases. We've tried to shorten up the process in the ways we can within the code we have. And I know that we've increased tenfold the number of cases being brought to the court and the number of people receiving fines. It's not what we want to see, but that's been the end result of increased activity and just staying on people to try to get things resolved. So in order to get more of this, you know, a presentable, clean yard, and prevent more of this, this is some properties we're dealing with. They're actually making progress, but we wanted to show you that, you know, in 2015, these were nice properties. There were no issues. Within 2 years, the accumulation of debris and other materials, cars, you know, anything you can name was in these 2 properties. So that's some of the situations we hope to address. The staff recommended changes are generally tweaks to improve clarity. We've included specific language from Arizona revised statutes. We've tried to pull it straight from the state law to make it, I mean, if the state legislature's for it, then I think we should, you know, kind of utilize that and be congruent with them. An effort to make penalties more of an encouragement for abatement of violations. Staff has recommended so kind of get into some specifics. Staff has recommended the addition of some definitions obtained from other municipal ordinances or state law. One item of note is the removal of the term junk from the definitions and from use in the ordinance. The use of the term junk always leads to arguments. Just, well, that's not junk. That's my, you know, so it's just like, we'll take that out. It's debris. We define it, so we'll go on. From state law, we've added the terms exterior inspection and interior inspection. We didn't really have those, and they're defined, and we'll get into that in a bit. Staff is recommending the addition of 4 definitions to address automobile-related issues. Just like the pictures show, there's a wide variety of the things that are occurring with cars and autos. RVs, we got those in state of, you know, destruction all over the place. So major vehicle repairs we're going to define as the pulling of an engine block, repair or replacement of a transmission, in front and rear axles, major body repair, dismantling, and similar work associated with automobiles, boats, and other motorized or non-motorized vehicle repair. And so we're differentiating that from minor vehicle repairs, the routine maintenance such as changing oil and tires, replacement of water pump, alternator, brakes, shocks, oil, air filters, spark plugs, minor body repair, and similar work associated with automobiles, boats, and other motorized or non-motorized vehicles. The other thing we are defining is major body repair versus minor body repair. So some of these are, you know, wrecked cars that somebody's either getting salvage title on and rebuilding, or they didn't want to pay to have it stored somewhere, so it gets stored on one of our lots or our residential properties. So major body repair, the removal and replacement of body panels, straightening a frame, replacement of more than one hinged aperturance, hood, door, trunk, etc. We have many vehicles that we write up that have no doors, no hood, no trunk. Bondo fiberglass, etc. for dent repair exceeding 23% of the surface area. I think that's supposed to be 25 because Mike Weaver pointed out that we have 23 in one and 25 in the other, so we'll have to fix that. And then, yeah, and replacement of roof. Minor body repair, you know, Bondo, fiberglass, dent repair not exceeding 25% of the surface area, replacing glass, windows, replacing a bumper, and installation of mirrors, tailgates, that kind of thing. So we're trying to differentiate what we would expect is normal and what we want to kind of allow, and then what things that we think are problematic and what we see. So, you know, we have somebody that in one of our neighborhoods is pulling an engine out of a wrecked vehicle, and it's there. I mean, you know, one of the things is, one, it's unsightly to see, but then they also take forever. You know, these things don't get done in a weekend or whatever, they get done in months. We've got a picture, you know, changing your oil shouldn't be a problem. That's not something we want to worry about. Staff recommends changing the entire section title for 913A from outside storage to exterior property and premises. Outside storage was kind of always seemed like a misnomer because it dealt with more, you know, different things on the exterior, not just storage. And so they made writing up some of our issues really kind of weird to, you know, it's, you know, trash that's stored. But so we want to change that. Staff recommends a new 913A1A1 or A that states clearly the expectation regarding maintaining premises in a clean and safe sanitary condition. So these are some of the highlights. We did a new 1B that specifically requires garbage to be kept in approved receptacles. So we're not saying that you got to have garbage pickup or service or whatever, but storing it in the trailer, storing it in the back of your pickup truck for weeks on end shouldn't be what we want to see. So you put it in a receptacle and, you know, keep the bugs and other vectors and stuff from getting into it. So that's something we've added. In newly numbered 9131E, staff recommends adding a restriction on storage of materials for projects that are exempt from obtaining permits, like fences and property walls not taller than 6 feet, so that the material is not left unscreened indefinitely. So we have a provision that's always been in there that if you get a building permit, that gives you the right to have building materials stored and stuff, and that goes along with it because there's a finite time for the building permit. The problem we've run into is that if it's a storage building that's under 120 square feet or something that doesn't trigger a permit, like a fence that's under 6 feet, we can end up with these projects going on and on and on and really get to the, you know, on the neighbor's nerves. So we thought we needed to add this to kind of address those situations. So we've added that. Storage of damaged and inoperable vehicles in residential neighborhoods is a citywide problem, and the construction of 913B, the original version, has made it extremely difficult. I didn't do that.
Matt will get that.
Has made it extremely difficult to achieve reductions in the number of violators. Staff recommends adoption of new language which comes from another valley municipality. So I don't know if you guys have ever read it. It's very convoluted, and it almost is like there's not, when you get done reading it, there's no violation. And so it just makes it difficult. We've been able to use it somewhat, but it's more kind of just encouraging somebody. So the goal in the revisions regarding automobiles and inoperable vehicles is to allow responsible citizens to work on their own vehicles while preventing the storage of wrecked, damaged, or inoperable vehicles. We also hope to prevent residential locations from being used as automobile repair shops, recycle businesses, or salvage yards. We've dealt with all those and are still getting calls about stuff, and it just keeps coming up. There is, when we get into the language, there is a prohibition against painting of vehicles. This is based on that if you paint them inside, it's dangerous. If you paint them outside, you're messing up the air. So it's a ADEQ thing. If it's outside, it's not really good, and it's a fire hazard if you're painting them on the inside. The changes, we're going to look at some changes in the dust proofing section. Mainly it was just to bring our language in compliance with the state law. Again, this is part of ADEQ, I think the PM10 regulations, just to try to, you know, cut down on particulate that gets raised in the air. So ours is just, we took out some stuff that was kind of convoluted and just lined it up with state law. In section 913C, item 4 has been deleted because it's confusing and problematic to enforce. We'll kind of look at that if anybody has questions. In section 913D, staff recommends adding more specific requirements regarding the maintenance of exterior elements of buildings and premises. We've encountered many situations where stairs, deck, etc., were unsafe because of improper construction or lack of maintenance. So we don't have a huge amount of places that have stairs, but we have some, and I've seen decks falling off houses. We've got stairs that are falling down and trip hazards and all that. So we want to tighten up and be able to go after that and get those addressed. In section 913D3, staff recommends deleting the current text on dangerous fences since it's already addressed in the zoning code. There's not a real reason to have it in both, and I'm not sure it lines up exactly. Staff recommends for 913D4 be amended as noted to more closely follow state law. We'll look at that. In section 913D6, original, so we ended up showing that as a deletion, but then when I was going back through everything, I realized this is something we actually used. It's regarding the condition of signs. So I know Bob, when I first got here, we were dealing with the sign from Joe's and some other antique signs. Some people thought maybe, but signs that just needed to go away, so we used that section. So I think we really want to retain it, and so we'll put that back in, take it out of the mark off. New item 913D6 should be renumbered 7. This requirement is based on similar language in the building and fire and zoning codes. It's added here, and this is regarding addressing. So the building code has always required people to put the address on the building, fire code, zoning, but we still have many places that don't maintain or even put the address on. So we're putting it here so they can add it when they, because that's part of their problem. It takes a lot of time to figure out what the actual address is. So that is one we're adding. And then new section 913F and G are pulled straight from ARS Title 9, Chapter 12, Residential Rental Inspection Programs. So the state, I guess there was a time when a lot of cities were introducing residential inspection programs, charging associated fees, and the landlords didn't like that. So the state wrote the section to kind of cover that. So what we're doing is we're not looking to do any kind of inspection program. We have no desire to go out every year and look at all these. We get probably 3 or 4 or 5 cases a year of legitimate issues like this one where the ceiling fell in because of rainwater that got in, that we have a real difficult time addressing because our code just doesn't really let us do it, or we have to go to the unsafe building, and that's kind of problematic. So we're adding those sections straight from the Arizona Revised Statutes. This is where that ceiling fell down on the kitchen counter and stuff. So we do get some of these where somebody is getting evicted and they're trying to kind of utilize us as a tool to not get evicted. And so we did write a definition of lawful tenant. Lawful tenant term is actually in the state law. They didn't really define it. So we've got a definition here basically to try to say if you're a tenant in good standing, you've got a signed lease and you're current on your rent and you have an issue, then we'll try to deal with it and address it through these code sections here. If you're if this is about you trying to get back at the landlord and you're not current, then that's not something we want to get involved in. So and then under section 914, staff has recommended just a few significant changes. So the previous sections are the definition that we just kind of talked about in high-level overview, are definitions and the actual violations. 914 is the actual enforcement side. So this, we didn't do a lot of changes in this. The primary ones was to raise the base fine. The first offense has been $250. We'd like to see it go to $350. Second offense is $600. And those only come into play when it's gone to court and when they've been found to have been in violation on a particular day. So if they don't go to court, these fines don't get issued. And then what we want to do is, okay, and then so we have a 4-tier system. So if in 2 years you get a first offense and you pay $250, you get a second offense and pay $500, you get a third offense and pay $750, or $1,000, and then you get the fourth offense, then we can go criminal. It's been surprising how many people we've gotten through all 4 of those levels. You would think that they would not want to, but they have. So we were trying to, and the big problem is that means each one of those figure 3 months to 4 months for each stage. Now you're talking a year, 16 months that the neighbors have to put up with whatever's going on, and we're not getting any compliance. So we want to kind of try to shorten that time frame down. So we wanted additional encouragement. And we wanted to change it to 3 offenses, so we're basically taking out a tier, so that you have a first offense, a second offense, and then if you get to the 3rd offense, now you're gonna be dealing with Eric, or, or going to jail, or wearing a bracelet, I guess. So we just, hopefully that will shorten up the time and get some of our problem properties addressed. Staff also recommends the added language regarding inspection warrants. We wanted to define the warrant process. We want to have it available. And, want it clear to everybody that, if we need to do this, this is what the process is going to be. Section 915 cargo containers, we're deleting that because it's covered in the zoning code and they kind of don't really work exactly together, so we're just let it be a zoning issue. All right, and then next steps, November 20th, new business item. We're hoping to bring it back then, public hearing and consideration of amendments, ordinance and resolution adoption. There are some parallel changes that will need to kind of take place in the zoning code to kind of get everything lined up and tightened up. Parking autos in front yards, parking of RVs in front yards and driveways, fencing, required uniform materials, illegal business, such as car repair, salvage, recycling that we were talking about. So do you want to start? I'll let you were gracious to me. I will be gracious. Do you have questions you want to hit before we start going through it line by line?
Can I just say something real quick? When you bring it back on the 20th, it's a public hearing, not a new business item.
We'll fix, yeah.
Okay.
Start on this side, anyone?
I'll wait and listen.
We'll go to this side.
Keep going.
No, he's answered my question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I got a couple on the aspects on it, and I've looked through the red line and the highlighted yellow, and I'm concerned about a couple of interpretations in the aspect on it. I'm going to lay it out. Horse manure, is that considered trash? Is that considered garbage?
I believe it's
What-
defined under animal waste.
Animal waste.
Okay, so,
It's in the back part.
right, I know. But I mean, all right, in the aspect on it, okay, we've now got a trailer for hauling I'm going to say, waste in it. And then where it's talking about garbage and trash, it has to be a sealed unit that has to haul it, that can't be leaking or dispensing.
That's not in what we're discussing. That's in a different section.
Okay,
So
so,
we don't have anything to do, when it gets on the road and whatever it's in, that's a public works question or a police question.
yeah, well, I'm concerned about the aspect is and I'm going to point the finger right here to myself. I have a trailer. I load it up in the trailer. When the trailer's full, I cover it up and I take it out to the sewer district. But it takes me, approximately 3 months to fill up the trailer. So would I now be in violation of storing?
No, because animal waste is not defined as garbage, and the requirement for keeping it in a receptacle is limited to garbage, which has its own definition.
Okay. That was one of my concerns.
Okay.
The aspect currently right now, if you have a vehicle that you're working on and you have it behind a fence, it can't be seen from the road or the right-of-way, that's okay. But not,
There's two different rules. So under Chapter 9, it can be screened. Under the zoning ordinance, if it can be seen from the neighbor's property, it's a violation. So what we end up doing usually on those is writing them up as zoning violations.
okay.
Don't want to be minutia here, but second story, we don't have a lot of second stories, but
That is covered under the Constitution. So we can't go and get a neighbor's yard. We have to be on the ground, and it has, chain link fence. We're not peeking over fences or anything
I
like that.
mean, if the neighbor goes upstairs, they're going to see more than other neighbors, so
that we will tell them that that's not something we can pursue.
Okay.
Right, correct, Joel? I mean, that's covered under privacy.
Well, that's a policy decision on whether you want, but, I mean, if it says if it can be seen from a neighbor's yard, we could also add in there, that doesn't apply if, it can be seen from a second floor or third floor or more.
Or just define it like he did, that it has to be from ground floor,
Yeah.
from the from on the ground,
Oh, that
from the
could-
neighbors.
Yeah,
That can be added in.
I would prefer not to add something that's constitutional. And so in all our training that we do as code enforcement officers, they're real specific about that. You know, I actually was reading Texas law, and they actually will let them stand in the back of a truck. Every training I've ever been to, you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's why I did want to hire, at one time, I wanted to hire some basketball guys that intern to have them walk the alleys, but, so no, we don't try to take advantage of and understand that that's a constitutional
We
protection.
get the calls a lot where they were climbing on my fence, looking over, up on top, standing in the truck, climbing on the wall. I don't know about the others. I've gotten that call 100 times, that they're climbing on the wall to look over, so it's good to know that.
It should not be happening.
Yeah.
And the other thing is vehicle repair shall not exceed 10 calendar days. If I have I'm gonna say an antique vehicle that I'm in the process of working on and doing, it's a project, I'm not gonna get it done inside 10 days. It's a project that I've worked on it for many years.
So one of the things that we've added is the definition for sheltered or unsheltered. So unsheltered is any area on a premises located outside of a garage or structure in such a manner as to be visible to a person standing on a public street, sidewalk, ground level of any adjoining piece of property. So I guess we do kind of cover that. But sheltered is like a carport. So, if it's on a carport and it's a restoration project, I don't think we have any problem. It's the, like the picture showed you.
I understand that.
And I think some of it's gonna come to how you kind of keep your stuff around it. If it's, work on it a weekend and then everything kind of gets put away, I don't think we're gonna get calls from the neighbors. So,
Well, when
it's hard to kind of, I think there's a provision, I'll have to double check before next time, that there are, within state law, there are some provisions for dealing with antique cars, or there's limitations and stuff like that, if it's a vintage car, so.
Well, I've been involved with people that just don't like the idea of the neighbor having that ability, because at 9 and 10 o'clock at night, they're out there working in their garage on a vehicle, and I can't sit outside and enjoy whatever, because I hear the electric drill or something else going on next door. And that irritates me in the aspect on it, because that person is not doing anything that's going to be harmful, but the neighbors aren't getting along. So therefore, they're looking for everything they can to make a complaint.
Right.
So I think, again, the city attorney can explain, I think he's well-versed in the noise ordinance, so if there has to be a number of people, so one neighbor does not make a noise complaint. I think it has to take a group of individuals. So, again, they're gonna they'll probably call the PD, and the PD might go there and say, hey, it's 10 o'clock, but we don't have a decibel reading in our code, any of that. And if 10 neighbors now are complaining, then I think is that a private nuisance? I don't know the difference, but public versus private, but I think that's where it goes. So this code doesn't address people, how late at night they can work on their car,
What I
or
was
cutting
worried
torches.
about was the idea that the vehicles had to be done within 10 days.
I think there's currently a 10-day thing in the code now, so I don't think we're changing the 10 days. I think we currently, isn't it 10 days? And you put it in a building, you can work on it in a building all day long for 400 days, and we don't regulate that. So if it's in a building, if we don't,
No.
So if you notice in the red lines under 1, so you've got the new stuff that we have under B.
page 11, we're on page 11 if you're
Yes,
following
yes.
along.
It does
Yep.
say 10 days there.
Right. But you also, you can go beyond.
I think the current code says 10 days.
Well, it says 10 days under
Page
D,
21.
under
Written
D.
notification must be name and address,
Yeah, if
physical
it's for-
registration of the owner vehicle. No case shall extended beyond 30-day calendar days for a vehicle that's already been parked. After 30 calendar days has expired, the vehicle must be stored in accordance with this section.
So what we get is a lot of restorations that never get restored, and they're just parts cars. They're taking parts off instead of actually doing the restoration. I think you saw some pictures of that too. So we do deal with restorations that are never, that they say that's their antique car, but they got a number of them, and there's nothing happening to them.
What I'm hearing is if it's in a garage or an enclosed fence, that they're okay.
If you want to change your transmission, if you want to change your engine and you're in a garage, I think you can do that. It's the stuff that's happening out where we get the most complaints, or this is happening in the driveway.
And I can understand that, if it would, say that in the aspect of, 10 days
can go back and look
in
at
the
that.
general, I'll say, in general view or something like this, where I just don't want to get involved in the idea where we're trying to say that you have to have it done within 10 days in the aspect on it, whether it is outside or even in the garage, where I'm working on it.
In the garage, we have no limit on how long you can work inside an enclosed building. There's nothing in there that says you can't work on the same car for years and years and years.
Larry, for this one, could we look at best practices, and maybe this is the work session tonight, just to get us started? We can,
Sure.
I don't see that.
I mean, it's a
And this
big,
language is based on, a lot of it came from Avondale. So it's another city about our size.
Krista, go ahead.
And so are you good with that? So it sounds to me, Chip, like as long as it's behind some kind of screening, it's not seen from the street front? That's what I'm hearing. Are you good with that? You ready to-
Yeah, well, I don't see that in the highlighted area where they have it right here. I do see it down below where it's crossed out, but not well up here.
So are we taking notes?
And that number 2?
I just have a couple of quick concerns as you had talked. Inspections kind of make me a little bit nervous when we start talking about going into somebody's house. Are you talking about rentals? Or you had mentioned somebody's ceiling coming down and then somebody else's deck or stairwell. Are you talking about rentals on that? Because I got a little bit confused if that's that's not a private property.
Right.
That's, okay, I just want to clarify that. Let's see. The vehicles in abundance, when are we checking for business licenses when we know that somebody's, is that part of what the process is to see if they have a license?
We do that. The problem is when they don't, having, how do you prove it and stuff like that. So it becomes problematic.
So we're just not, the idea is not to allow it at all. People to store them and pile them up and recycle them or whatever it is. I know there's
Right.
been several issues and some of us have gotten several calls on that.
Right.
So, let's see. Major and minor auto repairs, how is that determined? Are one of our code enforcement agents gonna go in and see if somebody's checking their oil or changing an engine? How are we gonna?
Well, I think what we tried to do is write it we tried to write it based on what the issues we've seen. We have pictures with the axle on rollers out, from the car and stuff like that. I think we wrote it pretty obvious. The things that we're seeing that are really offensive are, it's disassembled and that kind of thing. So, if you're not pulling the engine and the engine's staying put and you're changing your brakes, you got one tire off, that's one thing. We see a lot of cars, all 4 tires are gone, all the brake stuff's gone, and it's up on blocks, so.
And that's definitely a major repair.
Well, it is, I'm just wondering who's gonna determine. It was clarified in the writing, I just wanna, are you guys gonna you're gonna walk up and make sure that that's exactly what it is? Because somebody could argue it. Oh, that's not a major repair, that's why I'm asking.
Well, I got definition for major repair.
It's pretty clear as to major and minor.
Is there a different definition that you would use?
No, I'm just asking, that's with, is are the code compliance officers gonna walk up to look at the engine or look at the car and determine if it's a major or a minor? Is this something that they have to see from the street, or are they gonna actually walk up and make that determination?
We check to, when vehicles are parked back, backed in and stuff, we check to see if they have a current license plate. So I don't know that we're gonna, if a hood's up, we're not gonna stop and go, what's going on? If we drive by and there's an engine hoist and an engine out, or other things that are quite obvious, I think then we'll, ask the questions.
Okay.
Dave, isn't a lot of those kind of complaints neighbor-based? That someone's been working on their car for 30 days, or they're pounding, or a noise,
they
a
can
noise
be.
issue, or a visual issue?
We
But-
do have some neighborhoods where it's kind of the thing that they're all doing it, and so we probably, we need to address that. A lot of it is kind of, the one-off and stuff in a,
You don't go
subdivision.
out typically looking for auto repair in residences.
No, but I mean, if we're driving down the road and it's
And
really
you
bad.
see
then-
another one or
Right.
something, yeah.
But we're not driving, we got more than
Seeking
enough
them
to do.
Yeah.
But we do have some neighborhoods that, there's probably 4 or 5 houses on the block. They're all rebuilding a car, so, and I just don't think they know that that's not really kosher for this area. So, we want to be able to address that and clearly address it and just say, here's what you can do and stuff. In the 10-day thing, they're going to get a letter that gives them another 10 or 15 days, and they can call us, and we try to, work with everybody, so I think it won't be as problematic as maybe you're thinking. I mean, we have people we tell no. They call us and say, such and such is going on, and we're like, well, we can't, you can see it, but we can't from where you're talking about, and it's not, it's not something we can address. And so we kind of we have people unhappy both ways, but.
I
just
have,
one quick one, just-
Go ahead.
So I just have one more quick question. And with the trash receptacles, it says, you had said that what appears to be an appropriate trash receptacle, who defines that? How is it defined? Who decides what's an appropriate trash receptacle? Because some people have, they'll use a trailer, they'll use the back of a pickup truck, they have the regular trash can, so we just,
I think it actually,
Isn't it
For
specified
clarification.
Pinal County? Approved by Maricopa or Pinal County.
designed to
Health
prevent
Officer.
leakage, designed to prevent access from animals, rodents, and insects, designed to be washable.
so would a pickup truck, the bed of a pickup truck be permitted, a trailer, open
No.
trailer be permitted?
I
or-
mean, well, I guess if you want to put it in your camper shell, maybe, but,
So it need to meet those 3 prongs,
right, yeah.
designed to contain.
Designed to prevent animals and rodents, that includes birds, so you can't, you put it on the back of the truck, you got insects, you got birds and all that stuff.
So somebody couldn't use the back of a pickup truck and tarp it? Because we see that a lot, especially
I
in the
don't know,
horses.
we wouldn't consider that an approved,
No.
acceptable receptacle.
I guess that's my question, is
How do you know what's under the tarp?
how do you know what's approved and what's not? And how does, I guess for me, my issue is that I like clarity, and I wouldn't want to have it determined by whoever just happens to be the person that walks up to the house. So for that, we have a lot of people using trailers and pickup trucks right now.
So we could get photos of,
I think we're gonna try to address that when we talk about solid waste. Are we even gonna have a solid waste program here or not? That'll be your decision. But, most places, a trash receptacle is, everybody goes to Ace Hardware, they know what a trash receptacle. A pickup truck bed is not a trash receptacle. Most cities don't even allow you to just take your garbage bags and put them at the curb. They have to be in, a toter on wheels or something like that. If there's a tarp over the back of something and we don't know that there's trash in there, we can't enforce that because we don't know what's under that tarp. It could be a transmission, or it could be that motor, could be trash. So if we can't see it, then it does not exist.
Well,
So I think if- when it's,
Smell, or, I mean, if it's obvious there's flies and stuff, then I think we're gonna kind of.
we're gonna investigate that. But if we're driving down the street and we see a pickup truck with a tarp on it, unless there's a complaint that says, hey, someone has 3 months worth of trash, they're waiting for free dump week, unless we know that, it's hard to enforce.
Okay.
But I
'Cause
think
that
most people
happens all
know.
the time.
Exactly, and we have pictures of it tonight. That picture was taken last Thursday of an overflowing trailer with trash in it. So that's what we're trying to change here.
But that trailer didn't have a tarp on it.
Did not have a tarp on it.
But as soon as
But if
folks
it's
figure out
leaking-
that they
if it's
can put a
leaking-
tarp on it, then they will put a tarp on it.
Right.
And I think that's what Councilmember Rizzi is trying to get at the point of where it's real clear that this is okay, this is not okay.
Yeah, and if there's stuff leaking out of the truck that we know is waste and there's rodents and flies and smell, then I think we're
Brian.
gonna try to address it.
Bryant, we've all got kids up here. We've never disciplined our kids, and then once we're cracking down, they're not gonna like it and understand. So it's apparent we're gonna come out of this with much better laws. And how are we gonna educate our residents who are gonna be saying, I've been doing this for 40 years, I didn't know? Are you gonna come up with some kind of a plan through Al and whoever to, I mean, it's gonna
Absolutely.
take a lot of education. Otherwise, we're gonna be hearing it for years that I've always done this, why now?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I will say that the idea that everyone, I think there will be many in your favor, first of all. Let's not just assume always the other side of the coin. Let me just start with that. I think that I have heard many, many, many times over my time here, how can this be, Bryant? How can this be? So I think that let's start from there. I think we also need to assume that our residents don't know, and we need to explain like why is this in their best interest, and we need to come up with methods and ways that can be inexpensive and available to them. I think you've started that with the idea of an RFP for a solid waste trash idea for everyone to help, go out and do that RFP, and let's see what those rates come in at. But yes, absolutely, we will need to do an education piece. We will need to help people understand this change.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
also, the effective date of the ordinance, you could put that out as long as you want. And so that would be the education period.
Yeah.
So you may want to say it's effective July 1st. I don't know.
So you've got 3 months, you got 6 months to get
Something
your
like that.
place cleaned up, and get that transmission in there, because we are gonna be enforcing.
Yes.
Plus the process involved the 10-day letters, the 30 days
Yeah.
this and 30 days that, so you're
You
talking a
get
year
the
out.
warnings
talking
first.
years.
You get warnings first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody has an appeals, I mean, they have the ability to appeal and, ask questions, so,
And it talks
Yeah, it's
about,
not as though the mafia is gonna come down and say, you've
No.
done a bad thing, and throw them in the hoosegow. It just isn't gonna happen like that.
It's too bad, I got a neighbor,
Well,
never mind.
Yeah, me too.
Yes, it is.
I think one of the things, like when we talk about solid waste, is, is it 14 days right now? So it's 14 days, so now this trash is sitting out there for 14 days. And then they say, well, I'm gonna take care of it, and then it could be, another couple days. But, so, we've been starting to use the door hangers. We want to expand the use of the door hangers, so it's more of a friendly thing. So, again, it's a notice, but it's a different notice than getting the letter in the mail that says notice of violation. So we're trying to do that, but again, I think anything we can do on the website, anything we can do to educate people, again, if whatever effective date you
Social
want to
media,
make this, social
website.
media. But I guess I would agree with Bryant, when we've spent the last year talking about these top 10 properties and how much time and effort goes into, a lot of staff resources goes into these types of things. So,
These
anyway.
things become major issues for the neighborhood. I mean, I've spent significant amount of time, even with several members of our staff here, on properties of people that just don't understand how their property next to them is able to continue in this manner, and it's very hard to explain as their own property values just continue to diminish. And, I applaud our efforts of our staff that are doing all they can to follow council's direction and trying to do the appropriate steps in a proper manner. We're not gonna go faster than we have strength as a community, but we will. If that's the council's desire, we'll definitely be doing it to education.
It wasn't that long ago, we were sitting in this room with about 25 neighbors over on East Superstition who have And he is in, I guess he's over in Kingman now, in that jail or prison, where all the neighbors are, they had a neighborhood meeting right here because of the way our ordinances are written. And so how come we can't do this? How come we can't do that? How are we gonna get that cleaned up? So we're out there putting no trespassing signs on the property. We're trying to work with the neighbors, but they wanna know, well, how did this second, third, and fourth RV get here, and they're not hooked up to anything, and there's people living in sheds? I mean, it is kind of a wake-up call, and I think this is the kind of thing we're trying to address. I mean, that picture that Dave showed up on North Valley, again, in about 18 months, that went from a pristine property to, and as Dave said, a lot of these properties have intersections with the police department for stolen vehicles, for drugs, and when you see a piece of property that happens like that in less than 2 years, there's more than just going on of, this guy likes to collect stuff.
Yeah.
So they're collecting stuff, they're selling stuff, they're dismantling stuff, and so this is gonna give us a lot more tools. The way this code was written in '06, to be frank, it was worded in such a way that it did handcuff us. You can see this violation from this angle, you can see this violation from that angle, and then so, but the neighbors have had to live with it for all these years, so.
Way to go, Dave.
It wasn't that Dave, it was somebody else I think we're all thinking about, but it was not Dave. But again, that was a policy decision I think the community's changed in 12 years. I think population-wise, et cetera, but, and it is weird, you know, you see somebody with 8 cars in their front yard, and we're still working with that same person on 17th Avenue. And so I don't know how many times you have to take that same person. We're finally, where they had a cave underneath their back patio. They dug underneath their back patio. I mean, just, you see a lot of stuff. And again, these folks are social workers. I don't want to think that when you think of code officers, there are folks dealing with mental health issues. Yeah, there's folks that could be dealing with, you know, buying and selling stolen, whatever it is. But we're also dealing with hoarding situations. We're dealing with a lot of stuff. So I guess give us the due that we are working with people. We do give folks an opportunity to fix it. The judge is doing a great thing now. I don't know if I first initially agreed with it, but having court workers, so they're there working off their fine. Their fine may be from another case that because of code enforcement, but they're cleaning up someone else's property, filling a dumpster on another code violation case. So we're actually getting properties cleaned up through the C team as well. And the Community Development Corporation, we just cleaned up somebody's property 2 weeks ago. That wasn't a code case, but could very well have been. So, anyway.
Well, we're not done with this, so is that enough for tonight, you think?
That's enough for tonight. I guess we're looking for direction. If you have specific changes, you know, our dream was to bring this back for a public hearing and a vote. We may or may not be ready there yet. I guess we're looking to see if you have other specific questions or changes. We'll be happy to make them and bring it back.
We have a few comments, and I think we've got some of those and can update those, and we'll look at some best practices.
Well, this is very important, and it's going to affect the city for maybe 20 years, so we want to make sure we get it right. So let's take our time and do it right.
Only made it 12 years last time.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to add, Larry's reference to the Mesa brochure, that was a result of a voter initiative. And the voters gave the city of Mesa the ability to go out and really, really drill down on offensive properties. So.
And so am I hearing correctly that the council would want another work session on this item? So they have the opportunity to discuss more and ask more questions.
Well, I think what Kathy said is really important because that tells you that it was the residents that pushed for that. That's a big deal that the residents wanted that.
And sometimes if we have this meeting and it gets covered in the paper, then we'll be contacted over the next month. Hey, I hear you're doing this. Don't forget to do this. Or so we get input from the citizens. So I look forward to hearing from them.
So maybe another same kind of, well, not presentation fully, but maybe another discussion on November 19th? Is that what we're saying?
Sure.
And
But, I mean, in general, there's just 4 or 5 things?
yeah, that's what it sounded
Well,
like.
Mr. Mayor, there is one more
Things, but I think
item.
for time saving, I'll
Call us tomorrow.
email them or send them over.
Okay,
Well,
yeah, if you have something you want us to
Yeah.
research, if you get it to
Actually-
us, we'll go back, a specific code section or something, we can do that.
Well, actually, we've got to be careful with the open meeting law. So I think if you're going to have any issues, let's have another work session on it. But there is one more item that I think
So
Larry.
Joel wanted me to address on page 17, which is paragraph 5 regarding signage. So we might have to put an exemption here. I think in the sign code we were working on, unless otherwise, I think it's permitted by state law, some language like that. So if there are political signs, but in general, you can't just put I buy diabetic needles in the right-of-way in a sign. We're constantly picking up signs everywhere. So paragraph 5 is meant to deal with, you can't put stuff in the right-of-way. So if we want to have the exemption for political signs, it says other than government signs, which is government speech, and any city-sponsored events, which we rarely do, but I think if you want to add some, we could add some language that mirrors what we're trying to do in the sign code with the Gilbert case. There are some cities that are banning all signs in the right-of-way. You may have seen those stories up in Flagstaff. So some communities are banning even political signs in the right-of-way, except, I think, on state highways. So on Route 66, you can put a sign up for you're running for some office, but on any other street in Flagstaff, they're saying no. So again, that's a community decision, but I think for now, we can add language that says unless otherwise expressly permitted by state law or something. So we'll add some language for that and bring that back.
So we'll do another work session. We'll come back.
I think we're done for tonight. We'll be adjourned.